Jack had always valued the quiet of his ranch. The land had been in his family for generations, stretching across wide fields and rolling hills. Every morning, he woke before the sun, saddled his horse, and checked on the cattle. Life here was simple, steady, and full of a kind of peace he had never found in the nearby towns. He liked it that way. He liked the solitude, the way the wind whispered through the trees, and the sound of water trickling through the creek that ran behind the barn. On one particular afternoon, the sun hung low in the sky, painting the hills in warm gold and orange. Jack had been repairing a broken fence near the creek. The work was tiring but satisfying, and he enjoyed every moment of it. As he wiped the sweat from his brow, he noticed something unusual. Fresh footprints in the soft soil near the water. They weren't the tracks of his own cattle or horse. Someone had been there. Jack frowned. He was not used to visitors. The nearest town was miles away, and very few people ever came to the ranch unless they had business or were lost. He followed the tracks quietly, his boots sinking slightly into the earth. The footprints led to a bend in the creek, where the water ran clear and cool. There, partially hidden by overhanging trees, he saw them. Two women, who looked to be in their mid-20s, were near the water. They were washing clothes and laughing quietly to each other. The sight surprised him. For a moment, he simply stood still, unsure whether to call out or remain hidden. The women seemed unaware of him, enjoying the freedom of the creek as if the land belonged to them. Jack felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of him was curious. He had lived alone for so long that seeing other people, even unexpectedly, stirred a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Another part of him was cautious. He didn't want to frighten them, and he didn't like the idea of confronting strangers in his private land. So, he watched silently, keeping to the shadows of the trees. The women were laughing and chatting about nothing in particular. They seemed comfortable, carefree, enjoying the simple pleasure of the water against their skin and the warmth of the late afternoon sun. Jack remembered how he had felt as a boy, exploring the countryside with his friends, daring each other to wander further than anyone else. He smiled quietly to himself, recalling memories of youth and freedom. One of the women suddenly noticed a bird perched on a branch nearby. She pointed to it, her voice soft but filled with excitement. The other woman looked up and laughed. Jack listened from the shadows, feeling a little like a stranger peering into someone else's world. He realized that even though he had his quiet life, these moments reminded him that there was more to life beyond the ranch. As the sun dipped lower, shadows stretched across the land. Jack could see the water glinting in the last rays of light, and he felt a sudden urge to speak, but he held back. Instead, he continued to watch, noticing the way the women moved with ease, the laughter in their voices, and the simple grace in their gestures. He felt a quiet admiration for them, not in any personal sense, but as observers of life, living fully in the moment. Eventually, the women seemed to notice something. One of them looked around, squinting toward the woods. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "I thought this place was empty." Her companion nodded, and they both laughed quietly, as if embarrassed by their assumption. Jack's heart softened. They hadn't meant any harm. They were merely human, curious, and exploring. Jack finally stepped out from the shadows, making sure he didn't startle them. "This is private property," he said calmly, his voice steady but not harsh. The women turned, their faces showing surprise and a little worry. One of them spoke quickly. "We're sorry. We didn't know anyone lived here. We were just—" She paused, searching for the right words. "We thought the ranch was empty." Jack nodded slowly. He could see their honesty in their eyes. They weren't trying to sneak or steal anything. They were simply lost and curious. "I understand," he said, keeping his tone friendly. "You should be careful near the creek. It's easy to get hurt, and this land can be tricky if you're not familiar with it. The women smiled nervously, grateful for his understanding. They quickly gathered their belongings, washing the last bits of mud from their clothes before moving toward the path Jack had pointed out. Jack watched them for a few more moments, thinking about how different their lives were from his own. They lived in a world of towns and streets, cars and noise, while he had horses, cattle, and the endless sky above him. Even as he walked back to his barn, Jack couldn't stop thinking about the brief encounter. It reminded him that life could be unexpected, that even the quietest places could hold surprises. The women had come into his world for a short time, bringing laughter and energy, and then they would leave, returning to their own lives. But the memory of them, their voices, and the sunlight on the water would stay with him. That evening, Jack sat on the porch of his small cabin, sipping coffee and watching the stars begin to appear. The ranch was quiet again, the kind of deep silence that only comes when the world is at peace. But he felt a little different. There was a lightness in his chest, a feeling that he had glimpsed something beyond the routine of his days. It was a reminder that even in solitude, life could surprise him, teach him, and connect him to others in ways he never expected. He thought about the women once more. They hadn't asked for anything from him, and yet their presence had given him a gift. A reminder of curiosity, openness, and the simple joy of human connection. Jack knew that tomorrow he would return to his work on the ranch, checking fences, feeding cattle, and riding the hills. But he also knew that he would carry the memory of that afternoon with him. A story he could recall in quiet moments, smiling at the way life could reach out, even in the most unexpected places. As the night deepened, Jack finally stood and went inside. The ranch was dark, silent, and still. But for the first time in a long while, he felt the world outside had touched his own. It was a small, quiet adventure. One that required no grand gestures or dramatic events. Just two strangers, a creek, and a moment of shared humanity. And that, he realized, was more than enough. The next morning, Jack woke to the soft light of dawn spilling across the hills. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of grass and earth. He stretched, feeling the ache in his muscles from yesterday's work, and thought about the women at the creek. He wasn't angry or frustrated. If anything, he felt curious. He wondered where they had stayed for the night and if they were still exploring nearby. After feeding the cattle and checking the fences, Jack mounted his horse and rode slowly toward the creek. He wanted to make sure the women had found their way safely. As he approached, he saw them again. They had returned, carrying backpacks and walking carefully along the path he had pointed out. When they noticed him, they waved awkwardly, smiling nervously. "Good morning," Jack called out, keeping his voice calm and friendly. "I wanted to make sure you were all right." The women hurried to meet him, relief visible in their faces. "Thank you," one said. "We weren't sure if we should come back, but we wanted to see the creek again before we leave. It's beautiful here." Jack nodded. "It is. Just be careful. The rocks can be slippery, and the water can get deep in some places." He gestured toward a safer path leading along the creek. "Follow this path if you want to explore. It will keep you out of trouble." They thanked him again, and one of the women, whose name was Emily, asked, "Do you live here all alone?" "Yes," Jack replied. "I've lived here most of my life. It's quiet, but I like it that way. I get used to the silence." The other woman, Sarah, looked around at the trees and hills. "It must be amazing to live somewhere so peaceful," she said. "I can't imagine seeing this every day." Jack smiled. "It's a different kind of life. Sometimes it's lonely. But there's a lot to enjoy if you know how to look." The conversation grew more comfortable, and Jack realized he could guide the women safely through the area without feeling awkward. He showed them a small footbridge over the creek, pointing out where the water was calm and where it flowed quickly. He explained which areas were safe to walk and which spots were better left alone. The women listened carefully, asking questions and laughing when Jack told stories about his early days on the ranch. As they walked, Jack noticed how much energy the women had. They asked about the animals, the plants, and the history of the ranch. Emily seemed fascinated by the way Jack could identify every plant and tree, while Sarah laughed as Jack demonstrated how to handle a horse gently without startling it. Jack enjoyed teaching them. It was rare for him to share his world with others, and he found himself talking more than usual. At one point, they reached a small hill that overlooked the entire ranch. The view was breathtaking. Green pastures stretched as far as the eye could see, with cattle grazing and the creek winding through the land like a silver ribbon. The women were silent for a moment, taking in the beauty. "I've never seen anything like this," Emily said softly. "It's so peaceful, but so alive at the same time." Jack nodded. "That's what I like about it. You have to take the time to notice it, though. Life on a ranch isn't always easy, but it's honest." They spent the day exploring. Jack pointed out wildflowers, showed them how to recognize different bird calls, and even let them help feed some of the younger calves. The women laughed and shared stories of their own lives, talking about city streets, work, and the small adventures they had in their towns. Jack listened, enjoying the contrast between his quiet, predictable life and their lively, bustling world. By late afternoon, Jack suggested they rest by the creek. The women sat on a fallen log, and he remained standing, keeping a respectful distance. They talked about their families, their dreams, and the adventures they wanted to have. Jack shared small stories of growing up on the ranch, of riding horses through storms, and of quiet nights under the stars. "You've had quite a life here," Sarah said, smiling. "I think many people would never understand it unless they experienced it themselves." "That's true," Jack replied. "It's a different rhythm. You have to learn to listen to the land, to respect it. It teaches you patience and humility." The conversation grew quieter as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields. The women realized it was time to leave before it became too dark to navigate the paths. Jack walked with them to the main road, pointing out landmarks and making sure they knew the safest way back. Before they parted, Emily turned to him. "Thank you for showing us around. I've never met someone so connected to their land. It's inspiring." Jack nodded. "It was good to have company for a while. Be careful, and don't wander too far from the paths. Nature can be beautiful, but it can also be unforgiving." Sarah smiled. "We'll remember this day. It's rare to find someone willing to share their world so openly." The women finally waved goodbye, walking down the road that would take them back to civilization. Jack watched them go, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and melancholy. He returned to the ranch slowly, thinking about how brief encounters could leave lasting impressions. That night, Jack sat on the porch again, sipping coffee as the stars appeared one by one. He thought about the laughter of the women, their curiosity, and the way they had respected his land. It had been a small adventure, but it reminded him that life was not just about solitude. Moments of connection, even brief, could bring warmth and light into quiet lives. Jack reflected on the lessons he had shared and learned. Patience, respect, and openness were not just rules for life on a ranch. They were keys to living with others, even strangers. He felt grateful for the encounter, knowing that the women had left with memories of the ranch and its simple beauty, and that he, in turn, had a renewed sense of connection to the world beyond his land. The next morning, Jack returned to his usual routine, feeding the cattle, checking fences, and riding across the hills. The ranch was as quiet as ever, but he carried the memory of the day with him. Every time he passed the creek or saw the hill overlooking the fields, he remembered the voices, laughter, and curiosity of two women who had wandered onto his land. Jack understood that life could be full of surprises, and that the world beyond his ranch could be unpredictable, but also rewarding. He felt a renewed sense of gratitude for the quiet life he had chosen, and for the unexpected moments that reminded him of the beauty of human connection. Days later, he found a small note left on a rock near the creek, written in neat handwriting. It read, "Thank you for your kindness, and for showing us the beauty of your world. We will always remember today. Emily and Sarah." Jack smiled as he read it, feeling a warmth that stayed with him long after the women had gone. It was a reminder that even in solitude, one could leave a positive mark on others' lives, and others could leave a mark on theirs. As the sun rose the next morning, Jack looked across his fields and felt content. Life on the ranch continued, steady and predictable, but now with a small memory that brightened the days, a memory of laughter, curiosity, and the simple joy of shared humanity. He realized that the world could enter his life in unexpected ways, and it was up to him to welcome it with patience and respect. And so, the ranch remained quiet, the cattle grazing under the open sky, the creek flowing steadily through the land, and Jack tending to it all with a sense of peace and renewed appreciation for the moments that life brought, whether big or small.